Sponsored by CryptoMiner UK. Check out the purchasing links below.
Hello YouTube, I've got a Bitmain APW3++ power supply in front of me with some burnt plugs. But before I show you this, you need to like my video and subscribe.
So now it's okay?
There's just one more thing you need to do, and that is to click on the bell so that you get a notification when a new video comes out.
I hope it's okay.
Perfect. And the reason why these are burnt is because I was overclocking a Antminer S9. I had this power supply connected to 2 hash boards, and I had another power supply connected to the remaining hash board. I was putting near enough 1600 watts into 2 hash boards, but that was too much for the connectors. Power supply is fine. I've already replaced the connectors on the S9. So what I'm going to do is ship this off with a Z9 Mini, and a Z9 Mini only requires 4 connectors, which means I can remove these burnt ones. So if we have a close look, these 4 are obviously burnt. That one's harder to see, but it's the middle pin there, which means I need to examine the other ones, and they are slightly discoloured, but they don't look burnt. Maybe this one and maybe this one, but I think I can keep them on. So I've got 2, 4, 6 here, and then the remaining 4, which adds up to 10. And in fact, this clip here is almost about to break. That's a bit too wobbly, so I'll examine the others. And in fact, that one's broken, so that can be discarded, and that is one that's slightly discoloured. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I only need 4 connectors, so there's a spare connector. And if we have a close look, so this one that's broken is on its own lead, and then we got 3 broken ones on this thick one here, 1 broken one on this thick one here. So I need to find a way of re-sleeving this afterwards if it's possible. That means I need to cut these 2 thick heat sinks off. This one, which is separately heat sinked, can stay as it is, and that would mean that I've got to somehow make this nice and tidy later on. Looking at where the cables are screwed into the terminal, I can't easily access them. The top ones are behind this metal panel, and the bottom ones are covered by the top cables. The top cables are negative black, and the bottom cables are positive yellow. So the first step is to remove the top case. So I'll use this Extron screwdriver, and to keep all the screws together, I've got my neodymium magnets, and I'm just going to stick them all onto that pad so I don't lose them. There's 3 screws on this side. I'm not supposed to open up power supplies because the capacitors inside will be fully charged at around 330 volts DC. And the reason why I say DC, because it would gone through the full bridge rectifier, and then after that we'll go to the smoothing capacitors. If you short them out, you'll hear a very large bang. There's also 3 screws on this side, and then as you can see, the top lifts up. Those are the large capacitors that I was talking about. They're rated at 470 microfarads, and I should be able to see the voltage on there somewhere around 400 volts. We can see it says it's 450 volts. There won't be 450 volts in there, it'll be about 330 volts. Everything is covered in white gunk, mainly to stop dust and also moisture, and the other reason is so you can't service it. Normally on power supplies they say it's not serviceable. I don't think it says anywhere on here that it's not serviceable. Looking at these screws, they are hex screws. Let's get 3mm out, and indeed it's 3mm. The screws were quite difficult to remove. Next I need to isolate some of these cables. So I was keeping 1 on this, removing 3. I'm just going to nibble at this heat shrink. I think the reason why these are snapped is because these had actually fused into the S9 sockets, and that's why I put too much effort into ripping it off, and that obviously got caught. And then this one, which is on its own, the one with the broken locking mechanism, that's also going to get removed. Now it looks like I'm going to have to remove this cable tie and reapply it later, but I'll have to do it after I've screwed everything in. I'm going to try and reuse this, cut it as close as possible to here, and because the cable length will be less, I should be able to reuse it. I'm going to cut it as close as possible to the top without snipping the cables, like that, and then I should be able to push this excess bit out it'll only go one way because of the ratchet system, and now it's out. But if I could have got a screwdriver in here, a flat blade screwdriver, I would have been able to lift this upwards and then it would have been able to slide out easier. So now I'm going to try and separate this and make it a bit easier for me. I'll start off with this one because I was going to remove one from here, and it looks like I'm going to have to cut these heat sinks as well. Okay, so now that's removed. I'm not going to undo this because then I'll have to re-crimp it in and make sure it's going to be a strong connection. So what I'm going to do is cut the cables probably where the installation starts. I need to make sure I do the right ones. So on this one I'm only going to remove one, and we can see there's 3 black cores from this burnt one here. It's going to be quite tricky to spot which cable's which because it all merges in together. But we can see there's one there. Just double and triple check, make sure I cut the right ones. If I cut the wrong ones, then I've just destroyed one that I actually need. So I've cut that one. Now that one is in my way, so I'm going to move that to one side. Each time I make a change I need to check to make sure I'm doing the right one. I think it's these two. There's that one there and that one there. In fact I might have just to cut it higher just to make it easier for myself. Now that one should slide out, and then I just do the same on the yellow side, the positive side, and it looks like all those 3 are on the same bit here. Okay, so now that's been removed. It looks like they've got some kind of solder paste on there as well, so it's been soldered and crimped at the same time, which is good as long as it doesn't overheat. Now what I need to do is find these 3 cables. It's these 3 here. The other 2 are going to be cut high because it reaches in the middle and it's hard to reach. These cables will be reusable, it's just the plugs which are burnt, which might not be a good idea to reuse because firstly the clip's not there, which isn't a big deal, and also the metal pins would have expanded, so it might not make a proper connection. It's probably okay for low voltage, but for high voltage and high current it wouldn't be suitable. There'd be a lot of arcing. Just going to push all this back in. That's one side done. Now the other side I need to remove 3 cables. So there's 1, 2, 3, in fact it was 4 because there were 2 broken ones. So 2 burnt ones, well actually 3 broken ones. The one that's remaining is also kind of broken, so yeah, I yanked this off properly. The other one is okay, so I only need 1 from this side. There's no point in me attaching it to this and redoing these solder terminals. My glove's broken. So on this one there's just going to be 1 cable on this thick bundle. So what I'm going to do is probably cut the cables higher up so that I've got the strength that's behind this heat shrink. And to determine what is going to be the height, it's going to be determined by the heat shrink size. It looks like I don't have any thick ones. That's probably the thickest one that I've got, so that's not going to go around all the cables. In fact it has to go through these plugs, so I won't be able to replace the big one that I cut, but I should be able to replace these if I get the heat shrink on here. Just make sure there's no sharp edges as well, and then that can heat shrink on like that. But I'll use all the black ones if I've got any. I've got different colours in there. Okay, so now I need to find the one which was okay. There's only one, and I need to cut everything except these 3. And before I do that, I need to know how far to cut this. So if I say 1 centimetre, that should be alright. Make sure I've got these 3 isolated. Okay, so that's all 3 left there, and then when I put all this back together we'll go like this and cover the whole lot and make it a bit more stable. Now I need to do the same on the negative side, which is a bit more trickier because it spiral rounds a bit. I think I've isolated all 3 of them now, so I'll start cutting this and then just check it in a second. And that's all 3 cores still connected. Press all this in so it doesn't stick out. Give this desk a bit of a clean, and then I can bring out the hot air gun. I've got this UR, if that's how you say it, hot air workstation, which has a hot air gun and a soldering iron. I'm only going to use the hot air gun at the moment. I've got 3 bits of heat shrink. I'm going to cut one in half and use the half pieces to keep the cables together. where we had the big long heat shrinks before, and then use the bigger ones to go over the connector and the cables. I'm going to test this out to see how far they can shrink down, because I might not be able to do the same. I'm not going to be able to get a heat shrink over this plug, so anything that I can get over will have to go over here. Just going to check if I've got slightly smaller ones. I do, but the slightly smaller ones are not going to get over this connector, so I can only use the biggest ones that I've got. The biggest ones that I've got are 10mm by 40mm, so if that's going to shrink down by half to 5mm, it might not be enough. I might have to do a test first to be sure it can go down that much. And to test, I've got a off-cut somewhere which I've previously used, and it'll have to be a red one. I'll have to use that as a test. To cut them, you just use any kind of cutters or scissors. I'm just going to eyeball this. I could really use this cutting mat to tell me where the halfway mark is, but whatever way I cut it, it won't be precise. Or I use my pizza cutter because that's what it's there for cutting stuff, which is a lot better than side cutters. And then put these ones on so I can do all of them at the same time, because it takes the hot air gun a few minutes to cool down. I want to get this just above, in fact just below the end, that way it can wrap down a little bit. Put this one on, make sure there's no sharp edges sticking out. That one there, because those sharp edges might pierce through the heat shrinking. Push that back a bit to about there. Hopefully these won't move around too much. And I think this cutting mat isn't sensitive to temperature. I'm going to take the gun off, turn the power switch on the back. I can hear a hum, and now the lights are flashing, which indicates it can't read the temperatures. That's because it's off or disconnected. It's not disconnected, it's just powered off. We've got controls for the soldering iron and the hot air gun, so let's turn the hot air gun on. It says 100 degrees, which is its minimum temperature. That's ramping up, and I think I want about 200 degrees. Instead of guessing, I can just look at the temperature range on the heat shrink, and it says 125. So let's turn this down to 125. Now that's going to ramp down slowly because it's already too hot. I can also adjust the airflow, but for hot air gun I don't think I really need to. Okay, let's see if this works. So I'm going to just wave it on here. I think that is shrinking a little bit, but I want a bit more temperature so it works a bit quicker. So let's bring that up to 175 maybe. It shouldn't melt. So now I can see better results in this shrinking, so it's working a lot quicker. I think I can have this on a higher temperature just to make this work quicker. So let's try bringing that up to about 200. 210 will do. And I'm just waving this around all the sides until it can't shrink anymore. I can smell it burning a little bit, but it should be okay. I'm just going over it for the second time. Okay, and now to do the ends. So I'm just going to start from this end here so I can wrap around like that, and then I'm going to move across and rotate it at the same time. And again, the same thing on the negative side, so wrap that round so that can't slip, and then along the rest of the cables. So we can see a couple of bumps there where I didn't have it all the way flush. And now I'm just going to switch the hot air gun off. I'll set the temperature to 100 and then put the speed up. That way it can cool down quicker. When it gets to about 100, the power will be turned off. I think when I actually turn the hot air gun off like that. So the next stage that I'm going to do is push all these in. What I'm thinking is I'll do the two ends first, because then I'll be able to see if it can drop down in height when it gets past the cables, and that will determine whether I can put some more on here. In fact, I can do two bits rather than doing a big long bit. So make sure all these ends are flush. Okay, make sure they're sticking out a little bit so it can wrap around. Turn the hot gun on again. Set the temperature about 175 and then it should start shrinking. In fact, I need to start on this side first so it wraps around a little bit. So we can see on here it's not a tight fit where we've got the 3 cores, so it wouldn't be beneficial for me to do the heat shrink further up along the cable. In fact, I don't really need to do this because only 4 is required and I've got 4 there, so the 5th one is really a spare. And then I can switch this off, put the fan speed, the fan's already on full, so that's going to go down to 100 and then switch off shortly after when it cools down to maybe about 60 degrees Celsius. Or 100. So to connect this up, it was positive at the bottom, and I remember it's positive at the bottom because the positive cable was shorter than the negative cable. So if I straighten the cable out, I could rewind the video and find out, but we can see that the positive is shorter, which means it would go at the bottom like that. And when I tighten this up, I want these cables to be straight, so it's at an angle at the moment, but hopefully when I start twisting the final twist it will straighten up. In fact, it's not doing that, so I'm putting a bit of force on the connector at the same time. Now I can put the second side on. That's tight as possible. Probably could go a bit more tighter, but there's no need. Now to reuse this cable tie, I'm going to gather all the cables together and then I should be able to get this round, and because some cables been removed, I should be able to fit that through there. And then I want to do this as tight as possible. Pull this out with some pliers, not too much force that I rip it, and then cut the excess off. So we can see I've now got excess because there's less cables here. I want to cut this as flush as possible so you don't poke yourself. And then to make these ends a bit more tidier, I'm just going to put small cable ties on this, so I need 5 of them. I'll be using these APW3 cable ties, there's 1,000 in here. The length is 4 3/4 inches or 120 millimeters, and they're 3 millimeters wide. I'm going to maybe put these about 10 centimeters away from the end. They don't have to be precise. In fact, what I'll do, I'll loosen them on and then tighten them up later. In fact, I don't need to do this one because that heat shrink goes quite high, so I only need to do 4 of them. When you pull too hard, you can break them. And I did it again. And then just cut the ends off. The lid has a plastic thing here which stops the electronics from shortening at the top of the case. There's also plastics on the left and right hand side. There's no components anywhere near, but it's just there for protection. So I'm just going to put this on like this first, and then I can put this case on. And then I just put the 6 screws in 3 on each side. And finally the screws on the other side. and the other screw is hiding over here for some reason. I should have checked the polarity first, but I can check it now. I'm going to use this multimeter, Viva digital multimeter. Set it to 60 volts, that way it can read 12 volts DC. Plug the power supply in. Everything sounds healthy, and then I want to probe the pins. So we've got the positive, which is yellow, and the negative, which is the black, and we have a positive reading of 12.2 volts. Which means I've connected everything up correctly. And when I remove the power is removed, the fan's still spinning. So do I still have the 12 volts? Yes, I do. It's magic, this power supply. The voltage is dropping, and when it gets to 11.2 volts it stops spinning, but there's still voltage there, and that's because the capacitors are still charged. Obviously when I put a real load on here, the voltage will go down to 0. If you've liked this video and found anything useful, leave a thumbs up. If you haven't done already, please subscribe and click on the bell for more notifications, and could you also like my Facebook page, and I'll see you next time.